Factoring the long way starts similar to factoring the short way, except there's one big difference. To find out what number we do our factor tree of, we're going to take 2 times 5. So this first term coefficient and the constant, we're going to multiply them together and we're going to get 10. So now we're going to create a factor tree of 10. You have 1 and 10 and 2 and 5. So then I'm going to ask you, which of those factors adds to get you 11, which is a similar concept that we used when we did the short way. Well, 1 and 10 give you 11. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to rewrite our trinomial here into a polynomial with 4 terms. So I'm going to take 11x, and instead of writing 11x, I'm going to say 1x plus 10x. So 2x squared plus 1x plus 10x plus 5. So now we didn't change anything, we just wrote 1 plus 10 instead of writing 11. The reason why we want to do that is because now we're going to factor by grouping. And the point of factor by grouping is to be able to have 2 even groups. So now, instead of having only 3 terms, we have 4, and we can group the first 2 terms, and then we can group the second 2 terms. Next, the next step is that you are going to take a GCF out of each term separately. So, what is the GCF in this first binomial? Well, it's x. So I'm going to take out an x, and I'm going to be left with 2x plus 1. Now, what is the GCF of this binomial? It is 5. So I'm going to pull out a 5, and I'm going to bring my plus side down. And I'm going to have 2x plus 1. Alright, so what do you notice? Well, I notice that I have 2x plus 1 and 2x plus 1. This is something we need. Those 2 terms in the parentheses have to be exactly the same for this to be able to be factored. If they aren't the same, 2 things could have happened. You could have either first made a mistake, so go back and check your answer, or the second thing is that it can't be factored. So if you're doing everything correctly and it can be factored, these 2 terms are going to be exactly the same. So, what does that mean? Well, that means that's one of our factors. Not 2. The fact that they're both the same means that's 1. So it's 2x plus 1 is one of my factors. And the other factor actually comes from the GCFs that you put together. So it's also going to be x plus 5. How do you check your answer? Double distribute. Alright, let's look at another example. Alright, let's do 3x squared minus 13x minus 10. The very first thing you do, 3 times 10, and that gives us negative 30. So now we are going to do a factor tree of negative 30. Well, that's 1 and negative 30, 2 and negative 15, 3 negative 10, and 5 negative 6. Now, it doesn't have to be this way. I could have also said negative 1 and positive 30, but I'm just going to start this way and see if we can find a factor that adds to give me minus 13x. Do you see it? Two and negative 5 add to give me minus 13x. So now I want to use factor by grouping, and I need 4 terms. So I'm going to take negative 13x, and I'm going to write it as 2x plus minus 15. Now here's the catch though. I'm just going to recopy this, minus 10. And then I have plus 2x minus 15x. Now, you have to remember this one thing. When I put my parentheses to group 2 and 2 together, the first two terms and the second two terms, I have to have a positive sign in between the two parenthesis sets. So that means I have to make this minus plus a negative. So now I'm going to group those two terms, and I'm going to group negative 15x and minus 10. If you don't do that, it won't work, and then you'll feel like it's not factorable when it really could be factorable. Okay, so you have to have a plus sign right here in between your two groupings. Do you remember the next step? You're going to take a GCF out of the first binomial, and that GCF is x. And, before I get there, I'm going to be left with 3x plus 2. And then I'm going to take a GCF out of my second binomial. So I'm going to pull out negative 5, and I'm going to be left with 3x plus 2. Since these two factors are exactly the same, that means that's one of my factors. And the other factor comes from my GCFs put together. So I'm actually going to write it as x minus 5. So this is your answer in factored form. If you're not sure, go ahead and distribute. I want to show you one more quick thing, and I'm going to use this exact example. If I were to write my two factors, my 2 and my negative 15, in a different order, so say I did this. That's totally fine. We're still going to group and take out a GCF. So I'm going to take out a 3x here, and I'm going to be left with x minus 5. And I'm going to take out a 2 in my second one, and I'm going to be left with x minus 5. So, do you notice anything compared to that last example? So now, instead of having 3x plus 2 on the inside, I have the x plus 5. And instead of having the x on the first GCF and the minus 5 in the second one, I have 3x and I have 2. So you still get two factors inside the parentheses that are the same. And then you still get GCFs, and it becomes the same exact answer as before. So if you're sitting next to someone and they write 15 before 2, or you write 2 before 15, that's totally fine. If it's factorable and you do it correctly, it will still work out. But that person's GCFs are going to be the opposite of your GCFs. And then inside the binomial is going to be opposite to what is inside your binomial. You can always double check if you're not sure if you're right or not by double distributing. You will get the same exact answer that you start with.